The rescue mission. Jake Ryder, a seasoned astronaut and the only human aboard the Cylon battleship Valora, found himself in the middle of chaos. The ship's alarms blared, and blue emergency lights flashed across the metallic corridors. The Cylon, a tall, elegant race with shimmering skin and glowing eyes, were fighting a losing battle against their ancient enemies, the Crovars. The Crovars were brutal, reptilian creatures who thrived on destruction. Their ships, dark and jagged, swarmed the Cylon fleet like a pack of predators. Jake had been on a diplomatic mission to strengthen relations with the Cylon when the attack began. Now, instead of observing intergalactic politics, he was running through the ship, dodging falling debris and explosions. Despite being the only human, Jake felt an overwhelming urge to help. He wasn't a soldier, but his instinct to protect others was stronger than his fear. As Jake rounded a corner, he spotted Zarvath, the Cylon noble leading the fleet, pinned beneath a fallen beam. Zarvath's usual grace and confidence were gone, replaced by pain and desperation. His glowing golden eyes met Jake's, silently pleading for help. "Hold on," Jake shouted, sprinting to his side. The beam was massive, its surface crackling with residual energy from the blast. Jake's hands trembled as he grabbed the beam, the heat searing his palms through his gloves. With a deep breath and every ounce of strength he could muster, he heaved. The beam barely moved. "Human, leave me," Zarvath rasped, his voice weak, but still laced with authority. "You must save yourself." "Not a chance," Jake replied, his jaw tightening. "I'm not leaving you here." Spotting a discarded piece of piping nearby, Jake grabbed it and used it as leverage. He planted his feet and pushed with everything he had. The beam shifted slightly, then lifted just enough for Zarvath to crawl out. As soon as the noble was free, the beam collapsed with a deafening crash. Jake helped Zarvath to his feet, slinging the alien's arm over his shoulder. "Come on. We need to get to the bridge." "The ship, it's lost," Zarvath said, coughing. "The Crovars have overpowered us." "Then let's make sure you survive to fight another day," Jake shot back. The two made their way through the wrecked corridors, dodging sparks, collapsing walls, and the occasional Crovar scout. Jake's heart pounded as he fired the alien weapons Zarvath had handed him earlier. The Crovar scouts were relentless, their dark, scaled bodies blending into the shadows. Jake had no military training, but desperation sharpened his instincts. He hit his targets more often than he missed. Finally, they reached an escape pod bay. Zarvath hesitated, looking at Jake with a conflicted expression. "I will not leave my people behind." Jake grabbed him by the shoulders. "Listen to me. You're their leader. If you die here, who's going to lead them? Who's going to inspire them to fight back? You're more valuable alive." Zarvath stared at him, the glow in his eyes flickering like a dying flame. Then he nodded. "You are wise. For a human." Jake smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." Just as they prepared to board the escape pod, a Crovar warrior burst into the room, its razor-sharp claws glinting in the dim light. It lunged at Zarvath, but Jake stepped in its path, firing his weapon. The shot grazed the Crovar's shoulder, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The creature roared, swiping at Jake and sending him crashing into the wall. Dazed but determined, Jake reached for a loose panel on the floor and swung it at the Crovar with all his might. The improvised weapon hit its mark, knocking the alien off balance. Zarvath seized the opportunity, using his own weapon to finish the creature. Breathing heavily, Jake climbed to his feet. "I think that's our cue to leave." They entered the escape pod and launched just as the Valora exploded in a blinding flash of light. The pod rocked violently, but it held together. Through the small window, Jake watched as the Crovar fleet retreated, their goal accomplished. The Helen ship was destroyed, but Jake and Zarvath had survived. In the silence of the escape pod, Zarvath turned to Jake. "You saved my life. You had no obligation. yet you risked everything for me." Jake shrugged, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "That's what we humans do. We look out for each other, even when the odds are against us." Zarvath studied him for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "You are more noble than I could have imagined. Our people owe you a great debt." Jake chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Let's just get out of this alive first." Little did Jake know, this act of bravery would change his life forever. What Zarvath considered a great debt was beyond anything Jake could have imagined. The journey home. The escape pod hurtled through the void, its small cabin bathed in the pale glow of emergency lights. Jake Ryder sat strapped into his seat, his body aching from the battle aboard the Valora. Across from him sat Zarvath, the Exilan noble Jake had just saved. Despite his otherworldly appearance, shimmering skin and golden eyes, Zarvath now looked as fragile as any mortal being, his aura of command diminished by exhaustion and loss. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the hum of the pod's engines. Jake stared out the small viewport, watching debris from the destroyed silent fleet scatter across the stars. His mind raced with unanswered questions. Why had he risked his life for an alien leader he barely knew? Was it instinct, morality, or perhaps something deeper, something he couldn't yet define? Zarvath finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You could have left me to die, human. Most would have." Jake shrugged, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "Maybe. But I couldn't just walk away. It's not how I'm wired." Zarvath studied him, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Your species is unpredictable. Many see humans as primitive and selfish. But your actions suggest otherwise. Perhaps we have underestimated you." Jake smirked, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, we're full of surprises." As they approached the Earth's orbit, a warning light began to blink on the control panel. Zarvath leaned forward, his long fingers gliding over the alien symbols. "The pod's energy core is damaged. It won't sustain re-entry." Jake frowned, his heart sinking. "You're saying we'll burn up before we hit the ground?" "Not if we act quickly," Zarvath replied. "I can stabilize the core temporarily, but it will require unconventional methods." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Unconventional how?" Zarvath hesitated before pulling a small glowing orb from a compartment in his suit. The orb pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows on the pod's walls. "This is an energy fragment from my homeworld. It is highly unstable, but it can amplify the core's output long enough to ensure a safe descent." Jake eyed the orb warily. "And if it doesn't work?" Zarvath met his gaze. "Then we both perish." Jake sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Great. No pressure." With no better option, Zarvath carefully inserted the orb into a slot on the control panel. The pod shuddered violently as the core absorbed the energy, the lights flickering wildly. For a moment, it felt as though the entire craft might tear itself apart. Then, just as suddenly, the shaking stopped. The pod stabilized, its trajectory correcting. Zarvath exhaled slowly. "It is done. We will survive." Jake let out a relieved laugh, though his nerves were still frayed. "You Cylons sure know how to keep things interesting." As the pod entered Earth's atmosphere, Jake's thoughts turned to the mysterious box Zarvath had handed him before they launched. It now sat securely in a compartment beneath his seat. The box was unlike anything Jake had ever seen, crafted from a dark, polished material that seemed to absorb light, its surface covered in intricate, glowing patterns that shifted like living tattoos. "What's in the box?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. Zarvath's expression grew solemn. "A gift, a symbol of my people's gratitude. But it is not to be opened until you are safely on your homeworld." Jake frowned. "Why the secrecy?" "The gift is significant," Zarvath replied cryptically. "It is meant to change your life, but such changes must come at the right time." Jake wasn't sure whether to feel intrigued or uneasy. The box radiated a strange energy, one that seemed to tug at the edges of his mind, filling him with both curiosity and dread. What could possibly be inside that warranted such mystery? The pod finally broke through the atmosphere, the fiery glow of re-entry illuminating the cabin. Despite the turbulence, Jake felt a growing sense of relief. Earth's familiar blue-green surface came into view, its beauty striking even against the backdrop of recent chaos. This was home, a place where things made sense, where aliens and ancient wars were nothing more than the stuff of science fiction. But as the pod descended, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life would never be the same. The box sat beneath his seat, its presence a constant reminder that his journey was far from over. Whatever that Thailand had gifted him, it was more than just a token of appreciation. It was a key, one that would unlock a future Jake couldn't yet imagine. The pod splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, its landing cushioned by the planet's vast waters. Rescue ships were already en route, their flashing lights visible on the horizon. As the cabin filled with the sounds of approaching engines, Jake glanced at Zarvath. "Welcome to Earth," Jake said, his tone half joking, but his expression serious. Zarvath inclined his head. "And thank you, human, for your courage. You have done more than save a life. You have forged a bond between our people. It will not be forgotten." Jake nodded, though his mind remained focused on the box and the secrets it held. Something told him his role in this story was just beginning. The box unveiled. The sun dipped below the horizon as Jake Ryder sat alone in his apartment, staring at the mysterious box that had dominated his thoughts since he brought it back from space. Its polished surface reflected the dim light of his desk lamp, the glowing patterns shifting as though alive. Despite the exhaustion from the journey and the media frenzy that followed his return, Jake couldn't tear his eyes away from it. He had followed Zarvath's instructions to the letter, waiting until he was safely home to even consider opening the box. But now that he was here, in the stillness of his room, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on him. What kind of gift could an alien species consider life-changing? And why did Zarvath speak with such reverence and mystery about it? Jake reached out hesitantly, his fingers brushing against the smooth, cool surface of the box. A faint hum vibrated beneath his touch, as if the object was aware of him. He took a deep breath and spoke aloud, half to himself, half to the empty room. "All right, let's see what all the fuss is about." With a gentle twist, he unlocked the box's ornate clasp. A soft click echoed in the silence, followed by a faint hiss as the lid lifted on its own. Inside, nestled within a shimmering material that resembled liquid starlight, was a girl. She looked human, almost, but her skin had a faint pearlescent glow, and her silver hair shimmered like moonlight. Her eyes were closed, her expression serene, as though she were merely asleep. Jake froze, his heart racing. He blinked several times, half expecting the vision to disappear, but the girl remained. She was perfectly still, yet he could feel the subtle energy radiating from her. "What the?" Jake started, but his words caught in his throat when her eyes suddenly opened. They weren't human eyes. They were luminous, shifting between shades of blue and violet like an aurora. She sat up slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. When she turned to Jake, her gaze seemed to pierce straight through him. "Greetings," she said, her voice melodic and calm, but with a strange resonance that sent shivers down his spine. "I am Elira." Jake stumbled back, nearly knocking over his chair. "You're alive." She tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Of course, I am a life guardian, gifted to you by the silent noble Zarvath." Jake stared at her, his mind racing. "A life guardian? What does that even mean? And why were you in a box?" Elira rose from the box, her movements fluid and otherworldly. She stepped onto the floor, the shimmering material that had surrounded her now dissolving into thin air. That Exile honor those who perform great acts of bravery with gifts that transcend mortal understanding. "I am your gift, Jake Ryder. I am here to protect you, guide you, and ensure your survival against all threats, known and unknown. Jake blinked, struggling to process her words. Wait, protect me. From what? Elira's expression turned serious. The Crowvars. They will not forget what you have done. You thwarted their plans and saved Zarvath, a key figure in their war against the Kylan. They consider you a threat now. Their wrath will follow you. Jake sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair. Great, just great. I saved one alien, and now I've got an entire species gunning for me. Elira stepped closer, her glowing eyes softening. Do not fear. You are not alone in this. I have been created to ensure your safety. My abilities are vast, and my knowledge extends far beyond what your people have discovered. Jake couldn't help but laugh nervously. Abilities? Like what? Are you some kind of alien superhero? Elira smiled faintly, raising a hand. A small glowing orb of energy formed in her palm, pulsing with a soft hum. I possess the knowledge of advanced Hyzalan technology, the power to heal, and the ability to sense and neutralize threats. But more importantly, I will remain by your side, no matter the cost. Jake watched the energy orb flicker and fade, his skepticism giving way to a mix of awe and unease. So, you're stuck with me. In a manner of speaking, Elira said with a slight bow. Your well-being is my purpose. You saved Zarvath, and in doing so, you earned the gratitude of the Kylan. I am the embodiment of that gratitude. Jake leaned back, exhaling slowly. This was far beyond anything he had ever imagined when he first signed up for the space mission. He had thought the hardest part would be navigating alien diplomacy, but now he was dealing with a living, breathing gift who claimed to be his protector. So what happens now? He asked, his voice quieter. I just go back to living my life with you, following me around. Elira's gaze was steady. Your life will change, Jake Ryder. The Crowvars will come, but together, we will face them. You are no longer just a human. You are part of a greater story, one that will shape the future of your world. Jake swallowed hard, his eyes drifting back to the now empty box. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. The truth about Elira. Jake Ryder paced across his dimly lit apartment, his thoughts racing like a storm. Elira stood calmly by the window, her silvery hair catching the moonlight. She seemed serene, almost out of place in the chaos of Jake's emotions. The events of the past few days, the alien war, the mysterious box, and the revelation of her purpose, were too much to process. He finally stopped and turned to her, his voice sharper than he intended. All right, Elira. No more cryptic answers. If you're here to protect me, then I need the full story. What are you really? Why did Zarvath send you? And why do the Crowvars care about me? Elira's luminous eyes softened, and she stepped forward. I understand your frustration, Jake. Let me explain. She gestured toward the couch, and Jake reluctantly sat down, his arms crossed. Elira remained standing, her posture regal yet approachable. She began speaking, her melodic voice steady. I am a life guardian, a construct created by the Xylan using their most advanced biotechnology. I am not merely alive, I am designed. Every cell in my body is engineered for a single purpose: to ensure your survival. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. But my role is more than physical protection. I am also a repository of knowledge, a strategist, and, if needed, a warrior. Jake raised an eyebrow. A warrior? You look like you belong in a sci-fi painting, not a battlefield. Elira smiled faintly. Appearances can be deceiving. My abilities are beyond what your species has yet imagined. I am equipped to sense threats before they manifest, to neutralize enemies with precision, and to heal wounds that would otherwise be fatal. Jake leaned forward, his curiosity overtaking his skepticism. Okay, but why me? I get that I saved Zarvath, But it's not like I signed up to be part of some galactic war. Elira's expression grew serious. Your actions aboard the Valora were not just brave. They were pivotal. The Crovers see you as a threat because you disrupted their plans. They are not a species that forgives easily. Zarvath knew this, which is why he sent me. Without protection, the Crovars would hunt you down. They would not stop until you were eliminated. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his heart sinking. Great, so I'm a target now. That's just fantastic. Elira stepped closer, her voice softening. It is not just the Crovers who see you as important, Jake. The Exilin do as well. Your courage represents something rare, even among their own kind. They see you as a symbol of hope, proof that humanity is capable of greatness. My presence here is not only to protect you, but also to ensure that your potential is realized. Jake frowned, his mind swirling with doubt. Potential? Look, I'm just an astronaut. I'm not some chosen hero. Elira tilted her head, her glowing eyes studying him. You may see yourself that way, but the universe often chooses its heroes without asking permission. Jake slumped back into the couch, his frustration giving way to exhaustion. He wanted to argue, to reject the idea that he had any greater role to play. But deep down, a part of him knew there was no going back to his old life. After a moment of silence, he looked up at Elira. So what happens now? Do we just wait for the Crovers to show up and hope for the best? Elira's expression turned grave. The Crovers will come, but we will not wait for them to strike. There is something you must understand about them, Jake. They are not merely seeking revenge. Their hatred of the Cylon runs deeper than you can imagine. They see you as an extension of that conflict. She paused, her gaze drifting to the window. The Crovers are relentless, but they are not invincible. With the knowledge I possess, we can prepare. I will train you to defend yourself, to understand their tactics, and to use the tools of both your people and mine. Jake blinked. Wait, train me. I'm not exactly military material, Elira. You do not need to be a soldier, she replied. You need only be willing to learn. The Crovars underestimate humans. They see you as fragile, insignificant. That is your greatest advantage. Jake chuckled dryly. Great. I'll just let them underestimate me while they try to kill me. Elira stepped closer, her tone firm but not unkind. Jake, I know this is overwhelming. But you are stronger than you realize. The Exilans saw that strength in you. And so do I. Together, we can face whatever comes. Jake stared at her, searching her face for any hint of doubt or insincerity. There was none. Despite the surreal circumstances, he felt a flicker of confidence, a faint but growing belief that maybe, just maybe, he could rise to this challenge. All right, he said finally, his voice steady. If we're doing this, I'm going to need to know everything. No more secrets. Elira nodded, her expression resolute. Then I will tell you everything, Jake Ryder. The truth, the danger, and the path ahead. Together, we will prepare for what is to come. As the night deepened and the city outside his window faded into quiet, Jake realized there was no turning back. His life, his purpose, and perhaps even humanity's future were now tied to a luminous girl who had stepped out of a box, and the war that followed her. The enemy strikes. The first sign of trouble came 2 days after Jake's life took its unexpected turn. It started with a faint hum, almost imperceptible, that seemed to echo through the walls of his apartment. Jake dismissed it at first, chalking it up to faulty wiring or an overactive imagination. But Elira, seated by the window as if eternally watching, stiffened. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and her head tilted as though she were listening to something Jake couldn't hear. Elira, Jake asked cautiously. What is it? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she rose from her seat in a single fluid motion, her gaze fixed on the night sky beyond the window. They're here. Jake's heart sank. The Crovars. Yes, she replied, her voice calm but firm. Their ships are in orbit. They're scanning for you." The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He stood, his hands instinctively reaching for something, anything, that could serve as a weapon. "How do they even know where I am?" Elira turned to face him, her expression unreadable. The Axylon technology aboard the escape pod left a trace. It was enough for them to follow. "I had hoped to shield you longer, but their resources are vast." Jake cursed under his breath. "So what do we do? Hide? Run?" Elira stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Despite her delicate appearance, her grip was reassuringly strong. "No, we prepare. You are not defenseless, Jake Ryder. I will not allow them to harm you." Before Jake could respond, the hum grew louder, accompanied by a strange vibration that made the air feel heavy. He turned to the window and saw a streak of light flash across the sky. It wasn't a shooting star. It was a Crovar scout ship descending rapidly, its sleek, black surface glinting ominously against the city lights. "They're here already." Jake's voice was a mix of disbelief and panic. "That was fast." Elira didn't flinch. "They are efficient hunters. But they underestimate us." She extended her hand, and with a gesture, a glowing orb of energy appeared in her palm. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and Jake realized she wasn't just standing there. She was radiating some kind of force field. "Take this," she said, handing the orb to Jake. He hesitated, but the moment it touched his skin, the orb dissolved into a faint, protective glow that encased his body. "What is this?" Jake asked, feeling a strange warmth coursing through him. "A personal shield," Elira explained. "It will protect you from minor attacks, but it is not invincible. Stay close to me." Before Jake could ask more questions, the sound of breaking glass shattered the tense silence. He turned to see a Crovar warrior standing in the middle of his living room, its reptilian form towering over him. The creature's black armor glinted in the light, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Jake with predatory intent. Elira moved faster than Jake thought possible. In a blur of motion, she placed herself between him and the Crovar, her hands glowing with energy. "Do not touch him," she commanded, her voice resonating with an authority that even Jake found intimidating. The Crovar let out a guttural growl and lunged. Elira met its charge head-on, her movements a mesmerizing combination of precision and power. She dodged its claws with ease, her glowing hands striking with pinpoint accuracy. Each hit sent ripples of energy through the creature's armor, forcing it to stagger. Jake watched in awe and terror, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs refusing to move. The fight was unlike anything he had ever seen. Elira wasn't just fighting. She was dismantling the Crovar's every move, as though she could predict its attacks before they happened. "Jake." Elira's voice snapped him out of his daze. "Get to cover." He scrambled behind the overturned couch as the Crovar roared, pulling out a weapon that looked like a cross between a gun and a blade. It fired a bolt of red energy, narrowly missing Jake and leaving a smoking crater in the wall. Elira responded with a surge of her own energy, her glowing hands forming a barrier that absorbed the Crovar's attack. She then retaliated with a focused blast, striking the creature's weapon and rendering it useless. The Crovar hesitated, its growl turning into a hiss as it assessed the situation. "You cannot win," Elira said, her voice unwavering. "Leave now or face destruction." The Crovar snarled, but instead of retreating, it reached for a device on its belt. Elira's eyes widened. "Jake, stay down." Before she could stop it, the Crovar activated the device, releasing a pulse that sent a shockwave through the room. Jake felt his shield absorb most of the impact, but the force still knocked him off his feet. The lights flickered, and the air was filled with the smell of scorched metal. When the dust settled, the Crovar was gone, leaving behind only a faint scorch mark where it had stood. Jake pulled himself up, his heart pounding. What the hell was that? "A teleportation device," Elira replied, her tone grim. "It escaped, but it will report back to its superiors. They now know your location. Jake sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. So this is my life now. Fighting off alien assassins. Elira knelt beside him, her expression softer. It is a difficult path, but you are not alone, Jake. Together, we will face them, and we will prevail. Jake looked at her, the determination in her glowing eyes stirring something within him. He didn't feel brave, but he knew he couldn't afford to give up. Not now. Not with the fate of more than just his life hanging in the balance. The battle for Earth. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Jake Ryder's once ordinary life had become a whirlwind of training, strategy sessions, and late-night discussions with Elira. His apartment had been transformed into a makeshift command center, its walls now adorned with holographic maps, alien schematics, and detailed plans for defending against the Crovers. Elira proved to be an exceptional teacher, patient yet demanding. She pushed Jake to his limits, training him in techniques that blended human ingenuity with silent technology. He learned to wield advanced energy weapons, pilot drones with precision, and even harness his shield to deflect minor attacks. Despite his initial clumsiness, Jake began to improve, his confidence growing with each passing day. But the Crovars weren't idle. Their presence around Earth became more apparent with each passing moment. Reports of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances filled the news. Entire towns experienced power outages, and satellite feeds were mysteriously disrupted. The Crovers were probing Earth's defenses, testing its weaknesses. And they were closing in. The first wave. Jake's first real encounter with the Crovar invasion came one stormy night. He and Elira were monitoring a satellite feed when an alert blared across the room. A Crovar ship had entered the atmosphere, heading toward a small military base in the Nevada desert. The base was home to sensitive equipment, technology that could be repurposed to detect or counter alien incursions. They're targeting our ability to fight back, Elira explained, her voice calm but urgent. If they succeed, Earth's defenses will be blind. Jake grabbed his gear without hesitation. Then we stopped them. Moments later, they were aboard a Cylon scout ship, a sleek, silver craft that Elira had summoned from orbit. Jake gripped the controls nervously, following Elira's instructions as they sped toward Nevada. The desert stretched out beneath them, its barren expanse illuminated by flashes of lightning. As they approached the base, Jake spotted the Crovar ship. It hovered menacingly above the ground, its black hull bristling with weapons. Below, dozens of Crovar warriors disembarked, their clawed feet kicking up dust as they moved toward the base. Jake's heart pounded. There's no way we can take all of them. We don't need to, Elira replied, her glowing eyes scanning the scene. Our goal is to disrupt their mission. Follow my lead. They landed a safe distance away, using the storm as cover. Elira moved like a shadow, her movements impossibly quiet and precise. Jake followed, clutching an alien weapon that felt both strange and powerful in his hands. They reached the outskirts of the base, where the Crovers were setting up devices that pulsed with a sinister red light. Elira gestured for Jake to stay low. They're deploying a disruptor field. If they activate it, all communication within 100 miles will be cut off. Great, Jake muttered. How do we stop it? Elira handed him a small device, a Cylon explosive no larger than a baseball. Plant this on their power source. I'll draw their attention. Before Jake could protest, Elira stepped into the open. Her presence immediately drew the Crovar's attention, their guttural growls filling the air as they turned toward her. She raised her hands, energy crackling between her fingers. I am Elira, guardian of Jake Ryder, she declared, her voice carrying over the storm. You will not harm this world. The Crovers roared in response, charging toward her. Elira unleashed a wave of energy, sending several of them sprawling. She moved with inhuman speed, her strikes precise and devastating. Jake used the distraction to sneak toward the disruptor field. His heart raced as he approached the power source, a pulsating, glowing sphere surrounded by alien machinery. He placed the explosive carefully, just as Illyra had shown him. "All right," he whispered to himself. "Now tow." "Human," a guttural voice growled behind him. Jake spun around to find a Crover towering over him, its red eyes blazing. He raised his weapon, firing instinctively. The blast struck the Crover in the chest, staggering it but not taking it down. It lunged at him, claws outstretched. Jake rolled to the side, barely avoiding the attack. He fired again, this time aiming for its head. The Crovar collapsed with a thud, its body twitching. "Jake now." Illyra's voice echoed through his earpiece. Jake pressed the detonator, and the explosive went off with a deafening roar. The power source shattered, sending a shockwave that knocked several Crovers off their feet. The disruptor field flickered and died. Illyra appeared beside him, her expression calm despite the chaos. "You did well." Jake managed a shaky smile. "I didn't die. That's a win, right?" But their victory was short-lived. Above them, the Crovar ship's weapons began to charge, its cannons glowing ominously. "We need to leave," Illyra said, grabbing his arm. Now, they sprinted back to their ship, narrowly avoiding the Crovar's retaliatory fire. As they took off, Jake looked back at the base, now swarming with Crovers. The disruptor field was gone, but the battle was far from over. Rallying humanity. Over the next few days, Illyra and Jake worked tirelessly to share what they had learned with Earth's leaders. Despite initial skepticism, the evidence of the Crovar threat was undeniable. Nations put aside their differences, uniting against the common enemy. Military forces adapted quickly, incorporating Xylan technology to bolster their defenses. Jake found himself thrust into a leadership role he had never anticipated. He wasn't just a soldier or a pilot. He was a symbol of resistance. Illyra's unwavering faith in him inspired others, and her presence provided humanity with the edge it needed to stand a chance. The Crovers weren't prepared for the resilience of humanity. They had expected an easy conquest, but instead, they found a species willing to fight tooth and nail for its survival. Jake and Illyra became legends, their names spoken with reverence as the battle for Earth raged on. But Jake knew the hardest fight was still ahead. The Crovars wouldn't give up easily, and the cost of victory would be high. As he stood on the bridge of a human-Xylan hybrid ship, watching the stars, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of purpose. The battle for Earth wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity was capable of greatness, even in the face of unimaginable odds. A new era of friendship. The final battle against the Crovers was a turning point for Earth, humanity, and Jake Ryder's place in the universe. It happened in the dead of night, high above Earth's atmosphere, where the combined forces of humans and Xylan confronted the largest Crovar fleet ever assembled. Jake stood on the command bridge of the Unity, the first human-Xylan hybrid warship. Its sleek, reflective hull and alien energy cores symbolized the partnership between the two species. The ship was a marvel of engineering, a blend of human ingenuity and Xylan technology designed to outmaneuver and outlast the Crovers. "Are you ready, Jake?" Illyra's voice was calm, her glowing eyes locked on his. Jake gripped the controls of his tactical station, his jaw tight. "Ready as I'll ever be." The Crovar fleet loomed ahead, their jagged ships bristling with weapons. The sheer scale of their armada was overwhelming. Even with their newfound technology and unity, the odds were still against humanity. But Jake wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The decisive battle. The battle began with a thunderous roar as the Unity led a coordinated strike. Human fighter jets, equipped with Xylan shields and plasma cannons, darted through the Crovar ranks, unleashing devastating volleys of energy. Earth's ground-based defenses fired orbital cannons, their shots piercing the black void with precision. Jake directed squads from his station, his hands flying over the controls as he issued commands. The training and experience he'd gained under Illyra's guidance now flowed naturally, his decisions swift and effective. He wasn't just fighting, he was leading. Elira, seated at the central console, radiated a calm confidence. She monitored the battlefield with her heightened senses, her voice steady as she relayed crucial information. Crovar flagship moving to flank. Adjust positioning to intercept. On it, Jake replied, redirecting the fleet. The Unity banked sharply, its powerful engines humming as it moved to cut off the Crovar flagship. The maneuver worked, forcing the enemy ship into a vulnerable position. But the Crovers fought ferociously. Their ships unleashed waves of energy blasts, one of which struck the Unity, sending the crew sprawling. Jake grabbed onto the console, his heart pounding as sparks flew around him. "We can't take another hit like that," he shouted. "I'm reinforcing the shields," Elira said, her hands glowing as she interfaced directly with the ship. The energy barrier around the Unity brightened, absorbing the next volley of attacks. Jake glanced at her, a mix of awe and gratitude in his eyes. "I don't know how you do it. I was created for this," she replied simply. "But you, Jake, you chose this. That is far more remarkable." Turning the tide. Despite their initial setbacks, the tide began to turn. The Crovar fleet was unprepared for the combined might of human Thailand forces. Each passing hour saw their ships faltering, their formations breaking. But the victory came at a cost. Human pilots made incredible sacrifices, their bravery shining as brightly as the stars. Jake's heart ached with every loss, but he knew their efforts were not in vain. This was a fight for survival, a fight for something greater than themselves. As the battle reached its climax, Jake and Elira focused their attention on the Crovar flagship. Destroying it would end the war and force the remaining Crovers to retreat. But the ship was heavily fortified, its defenses impenetrable. "Jake," Elira said, turning to him, "we must take a risk. I will disable their shields, but you will have to deliver the final strike." Jake swallowed hard. "You're sure you can do it?" She nodded. "Trust me." The final blow. Elira left her station and moved to the center of the bridge, where a glowing orb of energy pulsed faintly. She placed her hands on it, and the ship's systems seemed to respond instantly. The Unity's weapons surged with power as Elira channeled her energy into a focused strike. Jake watched in awe as beams of light erupted from the Unity, cutting through the Crovar flagship's shields. "Their defenses are down," he shouted. "Now, Jake," Elira urged. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired the ship's primary weapon, a massive plasma cannon, directly at the Crovar flagship's core. The blast hit its mark, engulfing the enemy ship in a fiery explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, scattering the remaining Crovar vessels. The battle was over. A new beginning. In the days that followed, Earth celebrated its hard-fought victory. Humanity had proven its resilience, its courage, and its capacity for unity. The Thailand, deeply impressed by Jake's leadership and Earth's determination, proposed a formal alliance. Jake stood on a stage in front of a massive crowd, Elira by his side. The leaders of Earth and the Thailand watched as he addressed the gathered masses. This victory wasn't just about defeating the Crovers, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. It was about proving that we're capable of more. More than fighting. More than surviving. We proved that together, humans and Thailand, we can achieve the impossible. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices a testament to the hope that now filled the air. Elira placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, her expression warm. "You've done well, Jake Ryder. You've changed the course of history." Jake smiled at her, a mix of gratitude and pride in his eyes. "We did it, Elira. Together. A legacy of unity." The alliance between Earth and the Thailand ushered in a new era of peace and discovery. Humanity took its first steps into the larger universe, guided by the knowledge and technology of their new allies. As for Jake, he became a symbol of hope, a reminder that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. But he never let it go to his head. For him, The real victory wasn't in defeating the Crovers. It was in forging a bond that would shape the future of two worlds. And every night, as he looked up at the stars, he felt a sense of belonging, a reminder that the universe was vast, but no longer lonely. For among the stars, humanity had found not just allies, but family.